That diamond necklace? Worth 20 million. And I just watched it vanish. The host says it's cursed, he's not wrong. Now the detective's bleeding out. And the killer is on my guest list. Don't look away. The Mediterranean night breathed warm air against the grand windows of the Casino de Monte Carlo Salle Garnier ballroom. Below, the harbor glittered like a spilled jewel box, yachts bobbing on ink-black water. Inside, Alexandra Lexi Thompson stood poised at the edge of the swirling chaos she had meticulously conjured. Weeks of relentless planning, sleepless nights, and diplomatic wrangling had culminated in this. Monsieur Armand Lafleur's charity masquerade ball, an event already humming with the low thrum of wealth, power, and secrets draped in silk and velvet. Lexi, at 28, felt a familiar thrill course through her, a cocktail of adrenaline and profound satisfaction. Her porcelain skin, touched by the Riviera sun to a subtle golden glow, was partially concealed by a stunning silver half-mask, its intricate filigree catching the light of 1,000 crystal chandeliers. Her rich, dark brown hair cascaded in loose waves down her back, framing bright blue, almond-shaped eyes that scanned the room with sharp, professional curiosity. The fitted crimson gown she wore was her armor and her flag, elegant, commanding, hugging her slender yet athletic frame as she navigated the marble floor. The air vibrated with the seductive strains of a live tango orchestra. Masks of every conceivable design, feathered, bejeweled, sinister, alluring, turned the attendees into anonymous phantoms. Laughter, clinking crystal, and murmured conversations in a dozen languages created a hypnotic symphony. Lexi moved with practiced grace, a conductor ensuring every note of her opus played perfectly. She adjusted a slightly crooked centerpiece of white orchids, nodded reassurance to a nervous-looking violinist, and exchanged pleasantries with masked lords and ladies whose identities she knew only through meticulous guest lists. As she glided towards the champagne fountain, a flash of movement caught her eye. A young waiter, his face pale beneath a simple black domino mask, stumbled. A tray laden with flutes of vintage Dom Perignon tilted precariously. Lexi was there in an instant, her hand shooting out to steady the heavy tray with surprising strength. "Merci, mille fois merci, mademoiselle," the waiter gasped, relief washing over his features. "De rien," Lexi replied smoothly, her voice warm but firm. "Just breathe. Slow and steady wins the race, even with champagne." She gave his arm a reassuring pat before melting back into the crowd. Crisis averted. Another tiny victory. Her destination was the elevated host's table, a bastion of quiet authority overlooking the glittering throng. There sat Monsieur Armand Lafleur. Even seated, he exuded an imposing presence. Late 40s, tall and lean, he wore a bespoke tuxedo as naturally as a second skin. His dark gray hair was swept back from a high forehead, and his mask was pure, burnished gold, simple yet radiating an almost intimidating opulence. But it was his eyes, visible through the slits, that truly captivated and unnerved Lexi. Piercing green, they held depths that seemed to shift like the sea outside, glinting with unspoken knowledge and an enigmatic reserve that had fascinated her since their first meeting. "Mademoiselle Thompson," Lafleur's voice cut through the ambient noise, low and smooth as aged cognac. He gestured for her to approach. "You have surpassed even my considerable expectations. This," he swept a hand elegantly across the vista of his ball, "is not merely an event, it is an experience, a triumph." A surge of pure professional pride warmed Lexi's chest. "Thank you, Monsieur Lafleur. It's a privilege to bring your vision to life." She allowed herself a small, genuine smile. "The silent auction bids are exceeding projections, and the press coverage has been overwhelmingly positive." "Excellent," Lafleur murmured, his gaze lingering on her face, seeming to study her even through the mask. The intensity of his scrutiny sent an unexpected, faint shiver down Lexi's spine. "Your attention to detail is impeccable, which is precisely why I entrusted you with this." His gaze shifted pointedly to his left. Seated beside him, resplendent in a beaded emerald gown that hugged her petite, voluptuous figure, was Madame Colette Dupont. Her smooth, creamy complexion was flushed with excitement, her sparkling brown eyes dancing with mischief above her own elaborate feathered mask. But it was her décolletage that commanded attention. Nestled against her skin, catching and fracturing the chandelier light into dazzling rainbows, was the Étoile du Sud, the Star of the South, a diamond necklace of staggering antiquity and value. Its central pear-shaped stone alone was rumored to be over 30 carats, surrounded by a cascading constellation of smaller, flawless diamonds. It was a piece of history, a Lafleur family heirloom rarely seen in public. Madame Dupont graciously agreed to be its custodian for the evening, Lafleur explained, his voice dropping slightly. A final flourish for the auction announcements. "Lexi," he continued, using her first name for the first time, lending the request an air of grave intimacy. I need your personal assurance. At the conclusion of the evening, before Madame Dupont departs, you will personally retrieve the étoile and return it directly to me. Its security is paramount, its history complex. Lexi met his piercing green gaze, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle onto her shoulders. Of course, Monsieur Lafleur, she affirmed, her voice steady despite the sudden flutter in her stomach. You have my word, it will be handled with the utmost care. She bowed her head slightly towards the beaming Madame Dupont. It looks breathtaking, Madame. Merci, my dear, Madame Dupont trilled, touching the necklace almost reverently. It's like wearing starlight. The orchestra launched into a particularly passionate passage. The crowd responded, the energy shifting, becoming more charged, more fluid. Masks swirled with a crescendo of laughter. Lexi, needing to confirm the timing for the charity presentation speeches, turned to take her leave. Lafleur's voice, barely audible over the rising swell of music, stopped her. Remember, Mademoiselle Thompson, the étoile has witnessed much. Guard it well tonight. His words hung in the air, cryptic and heavy, as Lexi descended the steps back into the maelstrom. She pushed the odd comment aside, attributing it to the natural anxiety of entrusting such a priceless artifact. Her focus snapped back to the immediate demands of the ball: a minor dispute over seating near the terrace, a request for a specific champagne vintage, ensuring the auction display lights were perfectly angled. Time became fluid, measured in orchestral movements and circulating trays. Lexi was a whirlwind in red silk, solving problems before they fully formed, her bright eyes missing nothing. Yet, the necklace remained a fixed point in her peripheral awareness. She spotted Madame Dupont near the grand piano, laughing gaily with a cluster of admirers, the diamonds blazing at her throat. Later, she glimpsed her weaving through dancers near the terrace doors, the emerald gown a vibrant streak against the black and white of tuxedos. As the clock neared midnight, the climax of the formal proceedings approached. Lexi, near the stage, scanned the room for Madame Dupont to gently remind her about the necklace retrieval. The woman wasn't at Lafleur's table. Lexi's gaze swept the ballroom, past the bar, the dance floor, the quieter alcoves draped in velvet. Nothing. A flicker of unease, cold and sharp, pricked her professional composure. The music reached a feverish crescendo, a final dramatic flourish. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Masks were momentarily lifted for drinks, faces flushed with heat and exhilaration. In the sudden surge of movement, a collective release of tension, Lexi finally spotted the distinctive emerald green near one of the sweeping staircases leading to the upper balconies. Madame Dupont was chatting animatedly with a tall man in a flawlessly tailored tuxedo, his face obscured by a simple, elegant black mask. Lexi began to weave her way through the press of bodies, her heels clicking a rapid staccato on the marble. Madame Dupont. Pardon, Madame, she called out, her voice struggling to be heard over the din. Madame Dupont turned, her expression one of slightly tipsy surprise. Lexi, my dear, what a triumph! Armand must be thrilled. Lexi reached her, slightly breathless. He is, Madame, thank you. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but Monsieur Lafleur requested I retrieve the étoile now, before the evening winds down. She kept her smile professional, though her heart was beginning to drum an anxious rhythm. Madame Dupont's sparkling brown eyes blinked. Then her hand flew to her throat. Her fingers touched bare skin. Smooth, creamy skin, unadorned. The dazzling constellation of diamonds was gone. The color drained from Madame Dupont's face, leaving her smooth complexion ashen. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Her hand fluttered pathetically against her collarbone, searching for what was no longer there. Lexi's world tilted. The roar of the crowd, the triumphant music, the glittering lights, everything receded into a muffled, horrifying silence. Her own hand instinctively rose to her throat, mirroring Madame Dupont's gesture of shock. Her bright blue eyes, wide with dawning terror, locked onto the expanse of unbroken skin where the Lafleur heirloom, the priceless Étoile du Sud, should have blazed. Non, Madame Dupont finally whispered, the word a broken sound. Non, non. Non, it was here, just moments ago. I felt it. Panic, cold and absolute, seized Lexi's chest, squeezing the breath from her lungs. The cryptic weight of Lafleur's words, "Guard it well tonight," crashed over her. Her meticulously planned triumph, the pinnacle of her career, was crumbling into a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. The Star of the South, with its complex history and staggering value, was gone, vanished into the sea of masks and secrets. And the responsibility, the crushing, terrifying responsibility, rested squarely on her shoulders. The masquerade wasn't just hiding faces anymore, it had concealed a thief. The gilded fantasy of the ball dissolved, leaving only the chilling reality of deception. Lexi's gaze swept the anonymous, swirling crowd. Hundreds of potential suspects, each hidden behind silk and plaster. Where did she even begin? The luxurious dream of Monte Carlo had just become a gilded cage, and Lexi Thompson was trapped inside with a devastating loss and a mystery that threatened to shatter everything. The world snapped back into focus with jarring, painful clarity. The applause, the music, the chatter, it all roared back, a cruel counterpoint to the icy dread flooding Lexi's veins. Madame Dupont swayed, her hand still pressed to her bare throat, her face a mask of horrified disbelief. It was here," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I swear it. I spoke with Charles near the terrace, just a moment before you approached." Her wide, panicked brown eyes darted frantically around the immediate vicinity, scanning the marble floor, the skirts of nearby gowns. Nothing, only the gleam of polished stone and the shimmer of other, far less significant jewels. Lexi's mind, honed by years of anticipating disaster and orchestrating solutions, kicked into overdrive, momentarily overriding the paralyzing fear. "Focus, assess, act. Madame Dupont," she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Please, try to stay calm. When exactly did you last feel the necklace? When you spoke to Charles? Charles Dubois?" Madame Dupont choked out, pointing a shaking finger towards a distinguished-looking gentleman with silver hair now conversing near the terrace doors. "We spoke, oh, perhaps 5 minutes ago? Less? It was crowded. He complimented the étoile. I felt it against my skin when I laughed." Her voice hitched on a sob. "Armand, he'll be furious." Furious was an understatement. Lexi envisioned Lafleur's piercing green eyes turning glacial, the triumph of the evening dissolving into public scandal and unimaginable financial loss. Her career, her reputation, everything teetered on the edge of collapse. "Stay here, madame. Please, don't move. Don't speak to anyone else just yet." Lexi's tone brooked no argument. She needed control, however fragile. Ignoring the curious glances from nearby guests sensing a disturbance, Lexi scanned the floor around Madame Dupont, her event planner's eye searching for anything out of place. A dropped clasp, a glint where it shouldn't be. Nothing. Her gaze swept upwards, towards the sweeping staircase Madame Dupont had descended from. Had someone brushed past her? Bumped her deliberately in the press? The anonymity of the masks was now a suffocating blanket of suspicion. Her first instinct was Monsieur Lafleur. He needed to know, immediately. Steeling herself, Lexi turned towards the host's table. As she did, a figure detached itself from the shadows near a potted palm, moving with deliberate, unhurried grace directly into her path. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, his broad shoulders filling out a perfectly tailored midnight blue tuxedo that spoke of understated expense. A simple, elegant black domino mask covered the upper half of his face, but it did nothing to diminish the impact of his features below. A strong, clean-shaven jawline, a mouth set in a firm line, and eyes, Lexi's breath caught. Piercing blue eyes, the color of the Mediterranean at its deepest point, locked onto hers with unnerving intensity. They seemed to see through her panic, through her professional facade, straight to the frantic calculations whirring behind her bright blue irises. His olive-toned skin glowed warmly under the chandeliers, his dark brown hair cropped short and neat. "Mademoiselle Thompson?" His voice was a low baritone, smooth yet carrying an underlying current of steel. It wasn't a question, it was an identification. He held up a slim leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a badge. "Julien Saint Clair, Police Judiciaire de Monaco. I need a word. Immediately." His gaze flickered past her to the ashen-faced Madame Dupont, then back, his expression unreadable but alert. Relief warred with a fresh wave of apprehension. "The police? Already? How?" "Inspector," Lexi managed, her voice tight. I was just about to alert Monsieur Lafleur. There's been... The Étoile du Sud is missing," St. Clair finished for her, his tone flat. "I know." Security discreetly scanned the feed the moment Madame Dupont's gesture indicated distress. "Monsieur Lafleur has been informed. He requests discretion, naturally." He pocketed the badge. "You are the event planner. You know this space, these people, or at least who they are supposed to be. You will assist me." It wasn't a request, it was an order. Lexi bristled instinctively. Her carefully constructed world was imploding, and now this imposing, enigmatic stranger was stepping in, taking charge with an air of cool authority that both annoyed and, against her will, intrigued her. "Assist you? Inspector, I have a gala collapsing into chaos. I need to manage the guests, the vendors." "And I," St. Clair interrupted smoothly, stepping closer. He loomed over her, his height and presence momentarily blocking out the swirling crowd. Lexi caught a faint, clean scent of sandalwood and sea air. Need to find a necklace worth upwards of 20 million euros before it vanishes from this principality. Monsieur Lafleur was clear. Your full cooperation is required. Your knowledge is now an asset to this investigation. His piercing blue eyes held hers, challenging, assessing. Do you understand, Mademoiselle Thompson? Or shall I have Monsieur Lafleur reiterate his instructions? The implicit threat, her job, her future, hung in the air. Lexi swallowed hard, pushing down her rising frustration. He was right, damn him. Her unique access was crucial. But the way he looked at her, as if she were a potential suspect or merely a useful tool, set her teeth on edge. I understand, Inspector, she said, forcing her voice level. What do you need? First, Saint Clair said, his gaze sweeping the room with hawk-like precision. Secure Madame Dupont. Take her somewhere quiet, a service corridor, a small salon. Ensure she speaks to no one. Not even Monsieur Lafleur yet. I will join you momentarily. I need to establish a perimeter and alert my team at the exits. He pulled a slim, sophisticated phone from his inner pocket, already tapping the screen. Lexi nodded, her event planner instincts reasserting themselves. The Rose Salon, she suggested quickly. Down the main corridor, first left. It's reserved for the event, currently empty. I'll take her there. Good. St. Clair's eyes met hers again, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. Do not let her touch anything unnecessarily. And Mademoiselle Thompson. He paused, his voice dropping slightly. Try to recall anyone acting unusually around Madame Dupont in the last half hour. Anyone who lingered, anyone whose mask seemed ill-fitting, perhaps? With that cryptic instruction, he turned and melted back into the crowd, moving with the silent efficiency of a predator. Lexi took a deep, steadying breath, the scent of his sandalwood lingering faintly. Julien Saint Clair. The name resonated with an unexpected weight. She pushed the thought aside and focused on Madame Dupont, guiding the trembling woman through a discreet service door near the bar, away from the oblivious revelry. The plush, rose-colored confines of the small salon felt like a sanctuary, albeit one charged with tension. Armand will never forgive me, Madame Dupont whimpered, sinking onto a silk-covered chaise longue. The étoile, its history. It's cursed, you know, truly cursed. Lexi paused in pouring a glass of water from a carafe. Cursed, madame. Her curiosity, always her Achilles' heel, flared despite the circumstances. Madame Dupont accepted the water with shaking hands. Oh, yes, decades ago, a scandal. Armand's uncle, Philippe Lafleur, he acquired it under questionable circumstances. Rumor said it belonged to a Russian countess who vanished not long after. Philippe himself died mysteriously a year later, drowned right here in the harbor. They say the necklace was lost with him, until Armand miraculously found it in the family vaults years later. She shuddered. It brings misfortune. I felt it tonight. A coldness against my skin. Before Lexi could process this unsettling history, the door opened silently. Julien Saint Clair entered, closing it firmly behind him. He had removed his mask, revealing a face that was even more striking. Strong features, high cheekbones, and those relentless blue eyes that now scanned the room and its occupants with methodical intensity. Without the mask, he looked both more human and more formidable. Madame Dupont, he said, his voice calm but authoritative. He didn't sit, choosing to stand near the door, observing. My deepest sympathies for your distress. I need you to recount your movements precisely, from the time Monsieur Lafleur placed the necklace around your neck until the moment Mademoiselle Thompson discovered it missing. Every person you spoke to, every place you went, any contact you felt, however slight. Madame Dupont launched into a breathless, slightly disjointed narrative, receiving the necklace from Lafleur at the table, mingling near the champagne fountain, dancing briefly with a masked Argentine diplomat, conversing with a group near the grand piano. Such boring talk of stocks. Then her encounter with Charles Dubois near the terrace doors just before Lexi approached. She mentioned feeling a slight draft near the terrace, perhaps someone brushing past her, but couldn't be sure in the crowd. She was emphatic that Dubois hadn't touched her. Saint Clair listened impassively, only interrupting for clarifying details, the exact location near the terrace, the time she estimated speaking with Dubois. His gaze occasionally flickered to Lexi, as if gauging her reaction or silently demanding her corroboration. Lexi nodded when Madame Dupont's account matched her own observations. And this Charles Dubois? Saint Clair asked finally. You know him well? An old friend of Armand's, Madame Dupont replied. A financier, lives mostly in Geneva now, harmless really, more interested in vintage cars than jewels, I'd wager. Saint Clair made a note on a small pad. We will speak with him, Mademoiselle Thompson. He turned his full attention to her, the blue eyes pinning her in place. Your perspective. You were monitoring the event. Did you observe anyone paying undue attention to Madame Dupont? Anyone lingering near her, particularly after she received the necklace? Any waiters acting strangely? Any arguments nearby? Lexi closed her eyes for a second, forcing herself to replay the frantic tapestry of the evening. The waiter she'd helped. He'd been near the champagne fountain earlier, but Madame Dupont hadn't been there then. The masked guests. It was impossible. It was chaos, Inspector, she admitted, frustration creeping into her voice. Hundreds of people, masks, everyone was looking at everyone. Madame Dupont was a focal point because of the necklace. I saw her laughing near the piano, later heading towards the terrace. I lost sight of her only briefly during the height of the dancing before I went to retrieve her. She met his gaze. But there was someone. Near the terrace doors, just before Madame Dupont spoke with Dubois. I caught a glimpse as I was scanning the room. Saint Clair leaned forward slightly. Describe them. It was fleeting, Lexi cautioned. A figure moving quickly away from the terrace area, deeper into the ballroom. Not towards the main exits. They wore a dark cloak over their ball attire. Unusual for inside, but not unheard of, especially near the drafty terrace. And their mask, she concentrated. Not elaborate. Smooth, white porcelain. Featureless. Like a blank slate. It covered the entire face, not just half. And a detail surfaced. The clasp at the throat of the cloak. It looked old. Tarnished silver, maybe? Shaped like a coiled serpent. A flicker of intense interest sparked in St. Clair's eyes, quickly masked. A full-face white mask and a dark cloak with a serpent clasp. You're certain? As certain as I can be in that split second, Lexi affirmed. They moved with purpose, not like someone just strolling. St. Clair was silent for a moment, processing. The air in the small salon crackled with tension. Madame Dupont watched them both, wide-eyed. The distant sounds of the continuing ball felt like a cruel mockery. Interesting, St. Clair murmured, almost to himself. He straightened. Madame Dupont, please remain here. An officer will be posted outside for your safety and to take a formal statement. Do not discuss the necklace with anyone. He turned to Lexi. Mademoiselle Thompson, with me, now. He didn't wait for a response, striding towards the door. Lexi shot Madame Dupont an apologetic glance before following, her heels clicking rapidly on the parquet floor as she hurried to catch up with his long strides. They re-entered the bustling corridor behind the ballroom. Where are we going? Lexi demanded, struggling to keep pace. To the terrace, St. Clair stated, his voice clipped. If your cloaked figure was fleeing the scene near where Madame Dupont was last touched, perhaps they left more than just an impression. And, he glanced at her, a hint of something sharp in his gaze. To test a theory about Monsieur Lafleur's cursed heirloom, he led her not towards the main ballroom terrace doors, but down a narrower service corridor, pushing open a heavy fire door that led to a smaller, secondary terrace overlooking a dimly lit service alley below. The warm night air, smelling of salt and exhaust, hit Lexi's face. The muffled sounds of the gala faded slightly. St. Clair moved immediately to the stone balustrade, his eyes scanning the ground below, then the railing itself. He pulled a small, powerful flashlight from his pocket, its beam cutting through the gloom. Lexi watched, her heart pounding, feeling utterly out of her depth yet strangely compelled by his focused intensity. The beam swept over the ornate stonework, then it stopped, fixed on a spot near the corner of the balustrade, partially obscured by a potted oleander. St. Clair crouched, extending an arm over the railing, his fingers probing carefully. He stood up, turning towards Lexi. Held delicately between his thumb and forefinger, glinting faintly in the flashlight beam, was a single, perfect, brilliant cut diamond. It was small, perhaps a carat, but unmistakably part of a larger setting, part of a constellation. It seems, Julien Saint Clair said, his voice low and dangerous in the quiet night. His piercing blue eyes locked onto Lexi's, holding the diamond like cold, hard evidence. Your phantom wasn't quite as careful as they thought. The Étoile du Sud is shedding stars, Mademoiselle Thompson, and the trail leads away from the ballroom. He pocketed the diamond. It seems our thief preferred the service exit. We need to move. Now. The chase was on. The glittering cage of the Masquerade ball was behind them. Ahead lay the winding, moonlit streets of Monte Carlo and the shadowed expanse of the French Riviera, where secrets ran as deep as the sea and a thief clad in darkness was making their escape. Lexi looked from the diamond's former resting place to the determined set of Julien Saint Clair's jaw. The mystery had deepened, the danger felt more real, and the enigmatic inspector beside her was suddenly the only anchor in her swirling storm. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, but cooperation was her only path forward. She took a deep breath of the night air, the scent of scandal and the sea mingling with the faint, lingering trace of sandalwood. Lead the way, Inspector. The single diamond, cold and accusing in Julien Saint Clair's hand, extinguished the last embers of hope Lexi harbored for a simple solution. This was no drunken stumble or clumsy accident. It was deliberate theft, executed with chilling precision amidst her meticulously orchestrated chaos. The phantom in the white mask and serpent-clasped cloak wasn't just a thief. They were a ghost slipping through the gilded cracks of her perfect event. "Service exit," Julien stated, his voice cutting through the muffled sounds of the distant gala and the rhythmic sigh of the Mediterranean below. He pocketed the diamond with a swift, economical movement, his piercing blue eyes already scanning the shadowed service alley beneath the terrace. They wouldn't risk the main doors. Too many eyes, even masked ones. This way. He didn't wait for her agreement. Turning on his heel, he moved back through the fire door into the service corridor, his long strides forcing Lexi into a near jog to keep up. The plush, rose-colored sanctuary of the salon felt like a lifetime ago. Now they navigated a world of stark concrete, humming refrigeration units, and the faint clatter of distant kitchens, the unseen machinery powering the illusion of effortless luxury above. Julien pulled out his phone, speaking rapid-fire French. "Oui," confirmed theft. Single stone recovered terrace sud. Suspect, full white mask, dark cloak, serpent clasp. Exited via service alley. Initiate lockdown protocol Gamma, discreetly. No public alarm. Sweep all feeds, focus on service corridors and perimeter cams. 15 minutes prior to discovery. He paused, listening. "Non. Hold Dubois for questioning, but do not approach aggressively. He's a lead, not a suspect. Yet." He ended the call, sliding the phone back into his pocket without breaking stride. Lexi processed his words. Charles Dubois was being detained, and Julien had a lockdown protocol named after a Greek letter. The efficient, almost military precision with which he operated was both impressive and unnerving. Who was this man? "They're checking the security feeds?" Lexi asked, breathless from the pace and the adrenaline. "Already underway," Julien confirmed, pushing open a heavy metal door marked "Sortie de Service." Cool night air, laced with the scent of salt, garbage bins, and diesel, washed over them. They stepped into a narrow alley, flanked by high walls and overshadowed by the casino's ornate bulk. Dim security lights cast long, distorted shadows. But our phantom knew the cameras, knew the blind spots, knew this route. He gestured down the alley towards a bustling side street visible at its end. "They planned this." Lexi shivered, pulling her thin shawl tighter. The contrast between the stifling heat of the ballroom and the cool Riviera night was jarring. The diamond, dropped while climbing down? Julien was already crouching near the base of the wall beneath the terrace they'd just left. He flicked on his powerful flashlight again, the beam cutting a swath through the gloom. Possible, or deliberately discarded if they feared it was traceable. His light traced the rough stonework. No obvious scrape marks, no fabric snagged. He stood, frustration tightening his jaw. They were careful. "But everyone leaves a trace, Mademoiselle Thompson. We just haven't found it yet." He started walking purposefully towards the mouth of the alley, Lexi falling in beside him. The sounds of Monte Carlo nightlife, distant traffic, laughter from open-air cafes, the thrum of scooters, grew louder. The anonymity of the crowded streets felt vast and threatening now. "So, what now?" Lexi asked, scanning the faces of passers-by instinctively, searching for a flash of white porcelain or a glint of tarnished silver. "They could be anywhere, in a car, on a boat." "Not yet," Julien said with surprising certainty. He stopped just before they emerged onto the sidewalk, pulling her slightly into the deeper shadow of the alley entrance. His proximity was sudden, overwhelming. She caught the clean, masculine scent of sandalwood mixed with the night air, felt the latent strength radiating from his broad frame. His piercing eyes scanned the street with hawk-like intensity. A piece fell off. They know it. They'll be rattled. They might make a mistake. Or, he turned his gaze back to her, intense and probing. They might try to communicate. Communicate? With whom? Perhaps with someone who hired them. Perhaps to arrange passage. Perhaps, his voice lowered, to gloat. He pulled a small, clear evidence bag from an inner pocket. Inside it, carefully preserved, was the crumpled cocktail napkin Lexi had found. "This wasn't random litter, Mademoiselle Thompson. It was left deliberately, near where the diamond fell? Perhaps. Or perhaps it was meant for someone else entirely." He held it up in the dim light filtering from the street. The cryptic symbols, VDS, 2 a.m., La Baiser du Serpent, seemed to pulse with hidden meaning. VDS? Villa de Cyrene? Lexi ventured, recalling the name of Lafleur's legendary cliffside estate she'd visited during planning. But 2 a.m.? And La Baiser du Serpent? The serpent's kiss? That sounds ominous. Julien's expression was grim. Via de Sirenes possible, It's isolated, private, accessible by sea or a single winding road, perfect for a discreet rendezvous. La Base du Serpent, that's not a place. It's a code, or a warning. He studied her face, his gaze unsettlingly direct. You found this, near the terrace. Did you see who dropped it? Lexi shook her head, frustration gnawing at her. No, it was just there. On the floor near the potted plant where you found the diamond. I picked it up instinctively. Event planner habit, tidying up. She met his gaze, a spark of defiance flaring. You think I'm involved, don't you? That's why you're watching me like a hawk. Julien didn't flinch. I think everyone in that ballroom wearing a mask tonight is a potential suspect, Mademoiselle Thompson. Including the woman who orchestrated the event, had access to every detail, and was entrusted with the safe return of the necklace. His tone was cool, professional, but the accusation hung heavy in the air between them. Your finding this napkin could be coincidence, or it could be misdirection. Lexi's cheeks flushed with anger and hurt. I spent months planning this. My reputation, my entire career is tied to its success. Why would I sabotage it? Why would I steal a necklace that could land me in prison for decades? People steal for many reasons, mademoiselle, Julien countered, his voice dangerously soft. Greed, revenge, debt, or perhaps, his blue eyes held hers, seeming to delve into her thoughts. To protect someone else. Monsieur Lafleur is a powerful man. His enemies could use leverage against those close to him. The implication that she was involved with Lafleur or indebted to him was outrageous. That's ridiculous, she hissed, stepping back, putting distance between them. The warmth of his proximity was suddenly suffocating. I barely know the man. He's a client. Julien held her gaze for a long, charged moment. The sounds of the city seemed to fade. Lexi could see the calculation in his eyes, the relentless detective weighing every word, every reaction. She saw something else too, a flicker of doubt, or perhaps curiosity. Then his phone buzzed sharply, shattering the tension. He answered it, his eyes never leaving hers. Saint Clair. He listened intently, his expression hardening. Certain? A pause. Decor. Maintain surveillance. Do not approach. We're en route. He ended the call, his face a mask of grim determination. They found the cloak, he announced, his voice tight. Discarded in a dumpster 2 blocks west. The mask is gone. Hope surged briefly in Lexi. So we have evidence. Fibers, DNA. Julien shook his head curtly. The cloak is cheap theatrical velvet, mass-produced, untraceable, no distinctive fibers inside besides generic polyester lining. And the serpent clasp? A humorless smile touched his lips. Plated brass, worthless. Our phantoms shed their skin, Mademoiselle Thompson. They're still out there, likely unmasked, blending into the night. He looked down at the evidence bag containing the napkin. Which makes this, he tapped the plastic, our only tangible lead. Villa de Cyrene, 2 a.m., the serpent's kiss. He made a decision, his posture radiating renewed purpose. We're going. To the villa? Now? Lexi's mind raced. Shouldn't you call for backup? Alerte, Monsieur Lafleur? Lafleur is being monitored, Julien said cryptically, already striding out of the alley onto the sidewalk. He hailed a sleek black taxi idling nearby with an imperious gesture. And backup attracts attention. Our thief expects police. They expect sirens. They won't expect. He opened the taxi door for Lexi, his gaze meeting hers again, a dangerous glint in his blue eyes. Lexi hesitated. This felt reckless, suicidal even. Driving towards a potentially hostile rendezvous with an enigmatic detective she barely trusted, chasing a thief who had already proven themselves cunning and bold. Yet, the alternative, waiting in limbo while her career imploded, while the Étoile du Sud vanished forever, was unthinkable. And Julien Saint Clair, for all his suspicion and intimidating presence, radiated a terrifying competence. He was her only chance. Lexi slid into the cool leather interior of the taxi. Julien followed, giving the driver an address in rapid French. As the car pulled away from the curb, merging into the flow of traffic along the moonlit coast road, the towering facade of the Casino de Monte Carlo receded behind them. The gilded cage was gone. Ahead lay the dark, winding roads of the Cap d'Ale, leading to the isolated promontory where Villa de Sirène perched like a watchful gargoyle above the sea. Julien leaned back, his profile sharp in the passing streetlights. He seemed deep in thought, his earlier intensity banked but still palpable. Lexi stared out the window at the inky expanse of the Mediterranean, the rhythmic flash of a distant lighthouse punctuating the darkness. The stolen diamond felt like a cold weight in her pocket, though it was safely stored in Julien's evidence kit. Madame Dupont's words echoed. It's cursed. It brings misfortune. She glanced at Julien. Earlier, Madame Dupont mentioned a scandal about the necklace. Philippe Lafleur, a Russian countess who vanished. drowning. She kept her voice low, aware of the driver. Is that true? Is that why you're really here? Not just for the theft, but for history? Julien didn't turn his head immediately. When he finally looked at her, his expression was unreadable in the dim light, but his eyes held a depth of emotion she hadn't seen before, a flicker of pain perhaps, or long-buried anger. "The Étoile du Sud," he said, his voice a low rumble barely audible over the engine, "has blood on its stones, Mademoiselle Thompson. Philippe Lafleur didn't just acquire it under questionable circumstances, he stole it, from my grandmother, Natalia Volkova, the Russian countess who didn't vanish. She was murdered." The revelation hit Lexi like a physical blow. She stared at him, stunned. His grandmother? The piercing blue eyes, the Slavic structure beneath the Mediterranean tan. It suddenly made a terrible kind of sense. "Your grandmother?" she breathed. Julien nodded once, a sharp, bitter movement. "Philippe Lafleur drowned the night he stole it. Convenient. The necklace vanished with him, until Armand Lafleur conveniently rediscovered it in a forgotten vault years later, whitewashing its history with charitable galas." His voice dripped with cold contempt. "I joined the police judiciaire for many reasons, Mademoiselle Thompson. Solving the theft tonight is my duty, but uncovering the truth about what happened to Natalia Volkova, that is my mission, and Armand Lafleur knows far more than he admits about his uncle's crimes." He looked back out the window, his jaw clenched. "The thief tonight. They didn't just steal a necklace, they ripped open a grave, and I intend to find out who's dancing on the bones." Lexi sat in stunned silence as the taxi sped through the night. The glittering mystery of the Masquerade ball had dissolved into something darker, deeper, and infinitely more dangerous. The stolen necklace wasn't just a priceless jewel, it was the key to a decades-old murder. Julien Saint Clair wasn't just a detective, he was a man consumed by a personal vendetta, using the theft as a means to an end she barely understood. And she, Lexi Thompson, was trapped in the speeding car with him, racing towards a cliffside villa and a rendezvous with a phantom thief, under the ominous banner of the Serpent's Kiss. Trust was shattered. The only certainty was the pounding of her own heart and the chilling realization that the masquerade of deception had only just begun. The luxurious dream of Monaco had curdled into a perilous nightmare, and the enigmatic inspector beside her might be the most dangerous phantom of all. The taxi's engine hummed a low counterpoint to the roaring silence inside Lexi's head. Julien's revelation hung between them, thick and suffocating as the velvet night pressing against the car windows. His grandmother, murdered. The necklace, a blood-soaked heirloom. The glittering fantasy of the masquerade ball was now a grotesque charade, masking generations of greed and violence. Julien Saint Clair wasn't just a detective, he was an avenging ghost, his piercing blue eyes reflecting decades of inherited pain. He stared resolutely ahead, his profile a sharp silhouette against the passing streaks of coastal light. The warmth of his earlier proximity had vanished, replaced by a chilling intensity, a fortress walled by grief and suspicion. Lexi understood now the depths of his mistrust. To him, everyone connected to Lafleur was potentially complicit in the sin that stained the Étoile du Sud. The taxi wound its way higher along the Cap Dale, leaving the neon glow of Monte Carlo far below. The air grew cooler, scented heavily with pine resin and the salt tang rising from the invisible sea crashing against the cliffs. Occasional glimpses through the trees revealed the vast, moon-silvered expanse of the Mediterranean, a deceptive calm over the hidden currents below. Finally, the driver turned onto a narrow, unlit road guarded by imposing wrought-iron gates, currently swung open. A discreet plaque, illuminated by a single, low-powered lantern, read, "Via de Cyrene." The car crunched onto a gravel driveway snaking through dense, manicured gardens. Ahead, the villa emerged, a sprawling, pale stone behemoth perched precariously on the cliff's edge. Lit only by the moon and a few dim security lights, it looked less like a home and more like a brooding sentinel, its windows dark, empty eyes. The rhythmic crash of waves against the rocks far below provided a constant, ominous soundtrack. Julien paid the driver with crisp bills, instructing him to leave immediately. As the taxi's taillights vanished down the drive, swallowed by the darkness, a profound isolation descended. They were utterly alone with the whispering pines, the pounding sea, and whatever awaited them inside the silent villa. "Stay close," Julien murmured, his hand resting lightly on the butt of a holstered pistol Lexi hadn't noticed before. "And stay quiet." His voice was taut, all business again, the personal pain momentarily banked beneath professional focus. He moved with predatory silence towards a side entrance, a heavy oak door partially concealed by ivy. Lexi followed, her heart hammering against her ribs. The gravel seemed deafeningly loud under her heels. Julien paused at the door, testing the handle. It turned silently, unlocked. He exchanged a grim look with Lexi. Someone was expecting company. He pushed the door open just enough to slip through, Lexi close behind. They found themselves in a cavernous, marble-floored kitchen, illuminated only by moonlight streaming through high windows. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and disuse. Julien signaled for silence, drawing his pistol, holding it low and ready. Lexi pressed herself against a cold marble counter, her breath shallow. Julien moved like a shadow, checking adjoining rooms, a pantry, a deserted staff corridor. The villa felt hollow, abandoned. Yet, Lexi sensed a presence, a watchfulness. The cryptic note, 2 a.m., La baiser du serpent, pulsed in her mind. Was this the kiss? An ambush? Julien gestured towards a grand archway leading deeper into the house. They entered a vast living room, dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking, terrifying view of the moonlit sea. French doors stood open to a wide terrace, the sound of the waves much louder here. Moonlight glinted off polished chrome and glass furniture, casting long, distorted shadows. Julien's flashlight beam swept the room, catching dust motes dancing in the air. It stopped, fixed on an object placed deliberately in the center of a low-glass coffee table, the white porcelain mask. Featureless, smooth, and chillingly empty, it lay where anyone entering the room would see it immediately. Beside it, glinting dully under the flashlight, lay the tarnished silver serpent clasp from the cloak. "The phantom sheds another skin," Julien whispered, his voice barely audible over the sea's roar. He approached cautiously, scanning the shadows beyond the coffee table. A calling card. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked overhead. Julien snapped off the flashlight, plunging them into near darkness lit only by the moon. He grabbed Lexi's arm, pulling her swiftly behind a massive, upholstered sectional sofa facing the windows. They crouched, pressed close together in the confined space. Lexi could feel the rapid thud of his heart against her back, smell the sandalwood and salt on his skin. The proximity was electric, charged with adrenaline and fear, momentarily overriding the mistrust. Footsteps sounded on the grand staircase at the far end of the room. Slow, deliberate, descending. Lexi held her breath. A figure emerged from the stairwell shadows, silhouetted against the moonlit terrace doors. Not cloaked, not masked, dressed in dark, practical trousers and a turtleneck sweater. The build was familiar, tall, lean, commanding. The moonlight caught the sweep of dark gray hair. "Monsieur Armand Lafleur." Lexi gasped silently, her hand flying to her mouth. Julien's grip on her arm tightened, a silent command for silence. His body tensed, coiled like a spring. Lafleur walked calmly towards the coffee table, stopping to look down at the mask and clasp. He picked up the serpent clasp, turning it over in his long fingers. A sigh, heavy and weary, escaped him. "So," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the vast room. It wasn't addressed to anyone specific. "It begins again. The serpent stirs." He turned, looking not towards their hiding place, but towards the open terrace doors. "You might as well come in, Claude. The theatrics are tiresome." A second figure detached itself from the deeper shadows of the terrace, stepping into the moonlit living room. Lexi stifled another gasp. Charles Dubois, the financier Madame Dupont had spoken to just before the necklace vanished. He looked different now, the distinguished air replaced by a palpable tension, a hunted look in his eyes. He held a small, dark velvet pouch in one trembling hand. "Armand," Dubois' voice was strained. "You got my message. I had no choice." "Choice?" Lafleur's voice was ice. "You stole the étoile from under my roof, Claude, from the neck of my guest, during my event. That wasn't choice. That was stupidity and betrayal." He took a step closer. "Give it to me, now, before this becomes even more regrettable." Dubois clutched the pouch tighter. "Regrettable? Like Philippe? Like Natalia Volkova? You think I don't know the price of crossing a Lafleur?" His voice rose, edged with hysteria. "He told me what would happen if I didn't deliver it. He knows about the embezzlement, Armand. He threatened to expose everything. Ruin me. Prison." "He?" Lafleur's voice sharpened. "Who is he, Claude? Who put you up to this? The serpent?" Dubois flinched at the name. "He contacted me after the gala announcement. Knew everything. About the necklace's history, about Philippe, about my little indiscretions with the Geneva funds." He swallowed hard. "Said if I retrieved the étoile tonight and brought it here, the evidence against me disappears," he called it. The serpent's kiss, a final favor before vanishing. He thrust the pouch towards Lafleur. "Take it. It's cursed. I want nothing more to do with it, or you or your family's poisoned legacy." Lafleur reached for the pouch, his expression unreadable. "A legacy you were happy enough to profit from for decades, Claude, until now." His fingers closed around the velvet. Julien moved. He erupted from behind the sofa, pistol leveled, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Police judiciaire, hold it right there, both of you, hands where I can see them. Lafleur froze, his hand still on the pouch. Dubois yelped, staggering backwards, the pouch slipping from his grasp and tumbling to the marble floor. It fell open. Lexi, scrambling to her feet behind Julien, saw it clearly. Nestled in the velvet, glinting with cold fire in the moonlight, lay the Étoile du Sud. But it wasn't intact. The central pear-shaped diamond, the legendary Star of the South, was missing. Only the intricate platinum setting and the cascading smaller stones remained. It looked like a shattered constellation. "Where is the central stone, Dubois?" Julien demanded, his gaze flicking between the terrified financier and the eerily calm Lafleur. I don't know," Dubois stammered, raising his hands. "It was like that when I took it, I swear. It must have fallen off." "Fallen off?" Lafleur's voice was dangerously quiet. He bent slowly, retrieving the pouch and the damaged necklace. He held it up, the empty setting catching the moonlight. "Or removed. A down payment, perhaps, to your mysterious serpent." His piercing green eyes fixed on Dubois with lethal intensity. Before Dubois could answer, Julien took a step forward, his own gaze locked on Lafleur. "Forget the stone for a moment, Monsieur Lafleur. Let's talk about the blood on this necklace. Let's talk about Natalia Volkova, my grandmother." Lafleur's head snapped towards Julien. For the first time, genuine surprise flickered across his composed features, quickly replaced by wary calculation. "Saint Clair. I should have made the connection. The eyes." He studied Julien's face. "So, the police judiciaire harbors a ghost. How? Poetic." "Poetic?" Julien's voice was low, vibrating with suppressed rage. "She was murdered by your uncle. For this." He gestured violently at the broken necklace in Lafleur's hand. "And you knew. You always knew. You covered it up. You laundered its history with charity balls and lies. Where is the central stone really, Lafleur? Hidden away like Philippe's crime? Or did you sell it years ago?" Lafleur's expression hardened. "You know nothing, Inspector. My uncle was a monster. His sins are his own. The Étoile is Lafleur property, recovered legally." "Recovered?" Julien scoffed. "From the bottom of the harbor? Conveniently found after Philippe's accidental drowning? An accident that silenced him forever?" Julien took another step closer, the pistol unwavering. "I think you know exactly how Philippe acquired it. I think you know why Natalia Volkova vanished, and I think the serpent pulling Dubois's strings knows too. Who is he, Lafleur? An old enemy? A partner in crime? Or perhaps—" Julien's gaze swept the shadowed room. "He's listening right now?" A tense silence stretched, broken only by Dubois's ragged breathing and the relentless crash of waves. Lexi watched, frozen, the pieces of the decades-old puzzle clicking horribly into place. Julien's vendetta, Lafleur's cold denials, Dubois's terrified pawn act, and the mysterious, unseen serpent. Lafleur's lips thinned. "You overstep, Inspector. You have a stolen necklace and a confessed thief." He nodded towards Dubois. "Your duty is clear. Arrest him. My lawyers will handle the rest." "Not until I get answers," Julien growled. "Answers you won't find here," Lafleur said dismissively, turning slightly as if to walk away. Julien moved to intercept him. "We're not done." The movement was too sudden. Dubois, already on the edge of panic, misinterpreted it. He saw Julien advancing, saw Lafleur turning away, saw his own ruin looming. With a strangled cry, he lunged not towards Julien, but towards Lexi, who stood closest to the open terrace doors. "Get away from me!" he shrieked, grabbing Lexi roughly by the arm, pulling her against him as a shield. Lexi cried out, stumbling. Julien whirled, his pistol snapping towards Dubois and Lexi. "Let her go, Dubois!" Julien roared. Lafleur stood frozen, watching with detached interest, the broken necklace still clutched in his hand. Dubois backed towards the terrace, dragging Lexi with him. The cold night air whipped around them. "Stay back!" he yelled at Julien. "I'm leaving, with her. You'll let me go, or—" He never finished the sentence. A sharp crack split the night air, impossibly loud against the sea's roar. Not from Julien's pistol. Dubois jerked violently, his grip on Lexi slackening instantly. A look of profound surprise crossed his face. He crumpled forward, hitting the marble terrace floor with a sickening thud, a dark, rapidly spreading stain blossoming on his back. Lexi screamed, scrambling backwards, away from the body. Julien reacted instantly, shoving Lexi down behind the relative cover of a stone planter on the terrace. "Sniper!" he hissed, scanning the dark gardens and cliffs frantically. "Stay down." He crouched low, trying to locate the threat. Lafleur had vanished back into the shadows of the living room. Another shot rang out. This time, Julien grunted, staggering backwards. He clutched his upper arm, dark blood welling between his fingers, stark against the white of his shirt. "Julien!" Lexi screamed, terror for him momentarily eclipsing everything else. He stumbled, collapsing against the terrace balustrade, his pistol clattering to the stones. His face was pale, contorted with pain, his piercing blue eyes wide with shock and fury. He looked towards the dark tree line where the shot had originated, then his gaze locked onto Lexi, filled with a desperate urgency. "Lexi, run," he gasped, his voice thick with pain. "Get inside." But Lexi couldn't move. She was pinned by terror, staring at Julien bleeding against the moonlit stone, at Dubois' lifeless body nearby, at the dark maw of the villa where Lafleur had disappeared. The broken Étoile du Sud lay discarded on the living room floor where Lafleur must have dropped it. The serpent hadn't just kissed, it had struck. And in the echoing silence after the gunshots, with Julien bleeding and a killer hidden in the night, Lexi realized the masquerade was finally over. The deception lay exposed, raw and deadly, and the most dangerous phantom of all was still out there, watching from the shadows, having just delivered the fatal serpent's kiss. The game had turned lethal, and survival, not just the necklace, was now the prize. The echo of the second gunshot hung in the air, a brutal punctuation to the night's symphony of deception. Julien slumped against the cold stone balustrade, his face contorted in pain, blood seeping through the fingers clamped over his upper arm. His pistol lay useless on the terrace stones. Dubois's body was a dark, still mound nearby, and Lexi was frozen, terror locking her muscles, the scent of cordite and blood thick in the salt air. "Lexi, run!" Julien gasped again, his voice strained, eyes burning with urgency despite the agony. "Inside, now!" His command shattered her paralysis. Survival instinct roared. She scrambled backwards on hands and knees, away from the exposed terrace, away from the unseen sniper hidden in the moon-drenched gardens. Her gaze darted frantically. The open French doors leading back to the deathly silent living room felt like a trap. Lafleur had vanished. Where? The sniper could be anywhere. Her eyes caught movement deep within the villa, a sliver of light spilling from a doorway down a shadowed corridor branching off the main living area. Lafleur, or another threat? She had no choice. Staying on the terrace was suicide. She lunged through the French doors, staying low, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The broken Étoile du Sud lay abandoned near the coffee table, its empty setting a mocking void. Ignoring it, Lexi sprinted towards the corridor where she'd seen the light, her red gown snagging momentarily on the sharp edge of the chrome sectional. She tore it free, not caring. The corridor was narrow, lined with closed doors. The light came from the last one on the right, slightly ajar. Lexi pressed herself against the wall, listening. No voices, just the muffled, ever-present roar of the sea. She edged closer, peering through the crack. It was a study, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive mahogany desk, and standing behind it, bathed in the soft glow of a single brass desk lamp, was Armand Lafleur. He wasn't alone. Facing him, her back partially to the door, stood Madame Colette Dupont, but the sparkling socialite was gone. Her auburn hair was pulled back severely, her posture rigid, her expression hard and calculating. In her hand, glinting coldly under the lamp, was the missing central pear-shaped diamond of the Étoile du Sud, the star of the South itself. It dwarfed her fingers, radiating an almost malevolent brilliance. "Your theatrics grow tiresome, Armand," Madame Dupont said, her voice devoid of its usual trill, low and cold as the sea below. "Sending Dubois? A weak, greedy fool. Did you truly think he could retrieve it? Or were you hoping the police would conveniently eliminate him for you, like Philippe?" Lafleur's face was a mask of icy fury, but Lexi saw something else flicker in his piercing green eyes. Fear. "Claude was a necessary distraction, Colette, but you went too far. Killing him? Shooting the inspector?" Madame Dupont, Colette, gave a short, humorless laugh. "Dubois outlived his usefulness the moment he panicked and grabbed that silly planner girl. A loose end. As for Saint Clair," she shrugged, a chillingly casual gesture. "He was getting too close, asking the wrong questions about Natalia. His unfortunate heritage made him a liability. Besides," she held up the massive diamond, watching the light dance within its depths. "Accidents happen during high-stakes retrievals. The serpent's bite is swift." The serpent. Lexi's blood ran cold. Madame Dupont was the serpent. The mastermind, not the victim. Her distress, her gossip about the curse, all part of the act. "You stole your own necklace?" Lafleur hissed, incredulous. "During my gala? To frame Dubois? To what end, Colette? Revenge for a decades-old slight?" "Revenge?" Colette's laugh was sharper this time. "Oh, Armand, you always underestimate me. This isn't about Philippe's clumsy murder of that Russian woman, or your tedious family shame. This is about value." True value. She stroked the diamond almost lovingly. The étoile du Sud as a whole? Traceable, notorious, a millstone, but this? She held the star aloft. This central stone, separated, undocumented, its history blurred. This is pure, liquidable power, worth far more on the right markets than the entire assembled necklace ever was. Markets Philippe was too stupid to find, and you are too legitimate to touch. Lafleur's hand clenched on the edge of the desk. You planned this from the start, hiring Lexi Thompson, the Masquerade. The whispers you planted about the curse, Dubois' embezzlement, all to create chaos, a perfect cover to fracture the necklace and vanish with the prize. Perceptive for once, Colette acknowledged coolly. The planner was ideal, competent enough to ensure success, naive enough to be easily manipulated. The Masquerade provided perfect anonymity for my operative. The Phantom in white, a simple hireling who delivered the necklace to Dubois as arranged, after expertly removing the central stone during the theft. Dubois, terrified of exposure, played his part perfectly, bringing the setting here as demanded, expecting salvation. Her lips curved in a cruel smile. He received the serpent's kiss instead, as planned. His death ties up that loose end. Saint Clair's unfortunate injury removes another. And you, Armand. Her gaze hardened. You will publicly mourn the tragic theft and the violence that followed. You will declare the étoile lost, perhaps forever, and you will never speak of the star again. Or, she added softly, her eyes glinting with deadly promise, the truth about Natalia Volkova and Philippe's convenient drowning will become front-page news across Europe. Your precious legacy, your charitable facade. Dust. Lafleur paled. You wouldn't dare. You were complicit. Was I? Colette arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Prove it. All the evidence points to Philippe, and to you covering it up. Who will they believe? The grieving widow of Philippe's business partner, or the man who inherited everything? She pocketed the massive diamond with a smooth motion. Goodbye, Armand. Play your part well, for everyone's sake. She turned towards the door, towards Lexi. Lexi recoiled, pressing herself flat against the corridor wall, heart pounding so loudly she was sure it would betray her. Colette Dupont, the serpent, was steps away, a murderer walking calmly towards the exit, holding a fortune stained with blood. Lexi couldn't let her leave. Julien was bleeding. Dubois was dead. Lafleur was cornered. And the truth would vanish with that diamond buried under more lies. She looked around desperately. A heavy brass bookend shaped like a globe sat on a small table beside the study door. Without thinking, driven by pure adrenaline and outrage, Lexi grabbed it. As Colette Dupont swept out of the study, her expression coldly triumphant, Lexi stepped forward. Madame Dupont, Lexi said, her voice surprisingly steady, though her hands trembled clutching the bookend behind her back. Colette stopped, startled. Her eyes, those once sparkling brown eyes now hard as flint, narrowed. Mademoiselle Thompson, what are you? Her gaze flickered past Lexi, down the empty corridor. Calculating. Assessing the threat. You dropped something, Lexi said, forcing a small, tight smile. She held out her empty left hand. It was a pathetic ploy, buying seconds. Colette's lip curled in disdain. Clever girl, but not clever enough. Her hand dipped towards the elegant clutch purse she carried. Lexi didn't hesitate. She swung the heavy brass bookend with all her strength, not at Colette's head, but at the hand reaching into the purse. Thud! The impact was solid, jarring Lexi's arm. Colette cried out in shock and pain, the clutch purse flying from her grasp, skittering across the marble floor. Something hard and heavy, the diamond, thumped inside it. You little bitch! Colette snarled, cradling her injured hand, her composure shattered, venom replacing cold calculation. She lunged at Lexi, not with a weapon, but with surprising speed and ferocity, her manicured fingers clawing for Lexi's throat. Lexi stumbled backwards, raising the bookend defensively. Colette was stronger than she looked. They grappled in the narrow corridor, a whirl of red silk. Lexi managed to shove her hard against the wall. Colette gasped, momentarily winded. Before Lexi could strike again, a figure filled the corridor entrance. Julien Saint Clair. He leaned heavily against the doorframe, his face deathly pale, his left arm hanging uselessly at his side, the sleeve of his tuxedo jacket dark and sodden with blood. His right hand, however, was rock steady, pointing his retrieved pistol directly at Colette Dupont. His piercing blue eyes, though clouded with pain, burned with fierce, unwavering intensity. Enough, madam, he rasped, his voice rough but commanding. Police judiciaire. Hands where I can see them. Now. Colette froze, pressed against the wall, her chest heaving, her injured hand clutched to her chest. Hatred blazed in her eyes as she looked from Julien's gun to Lexi, still holding the bookend. Lafleur appeared in the study doorway, his expression grim, watching the tableau. "You're bleeding out, Inspector," Colette spat. "A last, desperate gambit." "You won't last." "I'll last long enough," Julien ground out. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his aim never wavered. "Lexi, the purse." Lexi didn't need telling twice. Keeping a wary eye on Colette, she scooped up the clutch purse. It felt unnaturally heavy. She opened it. Nestled inside, wrapped in a scrap of black velvet, was the Star of the South, blazing with captured moonlight even in the dim corridor. The sheer size and brilliance of it were breathtaking, almost obscene given the carnage it had wrought. "And the setting, Monsieur Lafleur," Julien commanded, his gaze flicking to the study. "If you please." Lafleur hesitated for only a second before turning back into the study. He emerged moments later holding the velvet pouch containing the broken remains of the Étoile du Sud, the empty platinum claw gaping where its heart should be. Julien gestured with the pistol. "Madame Dupont, you will walk slowly ahead of me, back to the living room. Monsieur Lafleur, you will follow. Lexi, stay behind me. If anyone makes a sudden move..." He left the threat hanging, the implication clear in his strained voice and unwavering aim. They moved in a macabre procession. Julien staggered slightly but kept the gun trained on Colette's back. Lexi followed, clutching the purse containing the star, her knuckles white. Lafleur walked stiffly, holding the pouch with the setting, his face unreadable. Back in the moonlit living room, the scene was a nightmare tableau. Dubois' body lay where it had fallen on the terrace, a dark stain spreading on the marble. The white porcelain mask and serpent clasp still sat on the coffee table, grotesque artifacts of the evening's deception. Julien motioned Colette towards a high-backed armchair. "Sit." He kept the gun on her while glancing at Lexi. "My phone, left pocket, call, emergency. Then call my direct line at the PJ. Codename Volkova." Lexi fumbled in his blood-stained jacket pocket, her fingers trembling. She found the phone, slick with blood. She dialed emergency services first, giving the villa address, reporting an officer down and a homicide. Her voice shook, but she relayed the information clearly. Then she dialed the number Julien dictated, repeating the code name Volkova. A crisp voice on the other end acknowledged immediately, stating backup and forensic teams were en route. Julien sagged slightly against the back of the sofa nearest him, his breath coming in shallow gasps, his face gray. But his eyes remained locked on Colette Dupont, who sat rigidly in the armchair, her expression one of smoldering fury, cradling her injured hand. "The serpent unmasked," Julien managed, his voice a raw whisper. "All these years, hiding in plain sight. Philippe's lover, his accomplice in Natalia's murder, the architect of the cover-up, and now, a thief and murderer yourself." Colette said nothing, her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. "You knew Philippe killed Natalia for the necklace," Julien pressed, fighting to stay conscious. "You helped stage his drowning when he became a liability, keeping the étoile hidden until Armand here could rediscover it safely years later, laundering its history. And tonight, you saw a chance to finally claim its true prize for yourself, cutting out the middlemen, even Armand." Lafleur stood near the terrace doors, looking out at the dark sea, his back to the room. He didn't deny it. "The phantom, the cloak, the napkin, Dubois," Lexi breathed, piecing it together. "All orchestrated by you." Colette finally spoke, her voice devoid of emotion. "Sentimentality is for fools, Inspector. Power is the only currency. Philippe was weak. Armand is constrained by his precious reputation. I am not." She looked at the blood soaking Julien's sleeve. "And it seems I underestimated your tenacity, and your little planners. Resourcefulness." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing rapidly louder, piercing the night. Red and blue lights began to strobe through the terrace windows, reflecting off the cold, empty mask on the table. Julien allowed himself a small, pained grimace that might have been meant as a smile. He looked at Lexi, holding the purse with the star, his gaze holding hers for a long moment. The suspicion was gone, replaced by a profound exhaustion and something else, a fierce, unspoken gratitude. "Seems we found the heart of the deception, Mademoiselle Thompson," he murmured, his voice fading. "Even if it was harder than expected." His knees buckled. The pistol slipped from his grasp as he collapsed sideways onto the sofa. "Julien!" Lexi dropped the purse and rushed to him, pressing her hands against the bloody wound on his arm, heedless of the crimson staining her silver mask and red gown. "Stay with me, help is here." Outside, car doors slammed. Shouted commands echoed, footsteps pounded on the gravel drive. Colette Dupont remained motionless in the chair, her face a stony mask, watching as the world she'd manipulated so carefully crashed down around her. Armand Lafleur turned slowly from the window, his green eyes meeting Lexi's over Julien's unconscious form. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of defeat, calculation, and perhaps, buried deep, a sliver of relief that the serpent's long game was finally over. The masquerade had ended. The deception lay exposed, raw and brutal under the flashing emergency lights. The diamonds, the shattered constellation, and its stolen bloody heart were evidence now. The living players were left to face the consequences, while the ghosts of the past, Natalia Volkova and Philippe Lafleur, finally had their reckoning whispered on the salt-tinged wind. And Lexi Thompson, the event planner who stumbled into a decades-old nightmare, knelt beside the wounded detective, her hands stained with his blood, realizing that the most captivating story she'd ever encountered was also the most dangerous, and its final chapter was still being written in sirens and survival. Enjoyed the story? Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one.